Hello and welcome to another episode of Deuce. We are here in the Clubhouse, and AP, we have a very special guest.
This is the acronym couch for this particular episode, so you call me AP, which is fine. We've got JA, the great John Alexander, joining us, who is here to tell us tales for days, I reckon, JA, because it, like having a prelim chat with you, and I think it's on Julie's rundown over there, we're going to go to places that mentions Frank Sinatra, Luciano Pavarotti, Bond girls, winning Davis Cups, Australian politics. Is there anything else that I might drop in there as well?
You slipped into the Bond girls. I don't know about that one, but
yeah.
I was just talking to Julie before, and I said, "You probably weren't born then," and she said, "No, I wasn't." I think she said, "But my mother was."
No, we've got some yarns over here on this couch today, I think, Jules.
John, it's so lovely to see you. Speaking of my rundown, someone has a note here, and it says, he will be a fantastic chat. The issue will be shutting him up. I don't know who wrote that. It clearly wasn't me. Someone in this room did. But it's lovely to see you.
That was always going to happen. That was always going to happen.
Yeah. Look, I come from a family that no one ever had to ask anyone a question. You'd volunteer everything that happened that day, and no questions need to be asked.
Tennis. Where did you first pick up a tennis racket, and where did you realise that it could take you places that you never thought imaginable?
I remember very clearly there was a tennis court being built in our backyard at Park Street, Narrabeen. Mm-hmm. My elder sister Annette had been having lessons, which I had attended one of her lessons as ball boy, and she's trying to toss me balls and teach me how to hit the forehand, and it's like over the Harbour Bridge and back along the Harbour Bridge and one to it. Just throw me the ball, and I'm certain I can hit it. And every time she throws me the ball, I'm missing, and I just couldn't believe it. Like, throw me another one. Anyway, that was the beginning with my eldest sister's racket, Pam, who no longer was living with us and moved on and married, and she'd left a racket behind. So I inherited the racket, and it threw the balls to me, and I tried to hit them.
And then next thing you know, you're sitting there with Frank Sinatra talking about life.
Natural progression.
No, that's life.
Yeah, exactly. How good.
What are you up to these days, Mr. Alexander? What's life look like?
None of your business, really.
Oh, well, I guess it's going to be a quick interview.
Let me see. Well, I still do quite a bit of work on settlement planning, which was one of the areas of public policy that I was involved in Parliament. Mm-hmm. So planning settlement and facilitating that through faster rail and high-speed rail, which in the end produces housing supply, which you might be interested in, because it's one of the big challenges that the next generation can't afford to buy a house because we don't have supply, and what we do have is too expensive. So I'm really into that. And I'm also into that I don't think the political culture is productive. This denigrating each other, it's like an episode of The Biggest Losers, and I think they have to try to work together. And I met with John Howard recently, just to begin the name dropping, and part of it is that what he said when he was leader of the opposition, that if Bob came up with good policy, he was only too happy to support it, and that was certainly the case in our great era of Bob Menzies and Arthur Caldwell, who worked so closely together, particularly on housing. And when you've got this adversarial, just knock the other party regardless, we're on the verge of not even looking at nuclear power, and then the other side will attack the other side on their plans for high-speed rail, and that won't get up, and we'll be back to the beginning. So it's time that our leaders got a little bit more mature and work together on behalf of the people who they pledge to do their best for, rather than do the best for themselves.
That's a little bit about Australian politics. You could basically, anyone listening in the Western world, you could just supplant the names in your backyard to the names that JA has just mentioned here. It's very, very similar. But I mean, it's a bit like life in general, though, isn't it? Like it's, you think that, so I don't agree with it. I think the exact opposite. You look at the big three, for instance, the fans of Djokovic, Nadal, Federer, and they'll always say, "Oh no, he's not as good as our guy because blah blah blah." I look at it and go, "We're all as good as each other, in various ways." But they've all brought so much joy and happiness to tennis and pushed it forward. But it seems some sections just want to go, "Oh no, he's no good because this guy's much better." It's It's kind of weird way of thinking.
Yeah, that's a negative way of thinking, which, there's too much of that. When you look at those great players, they all say wonderful things about each other.
They are.
And through their great and positive competitions with each other, they took the game to new heights. I mean, it has been an absolute magnificent era that those three have produced. Through their and their sportsmanship. Djokovic doesn't get a lot of credit for being a great sport, but when he loses, he shakes hands most genuinely. He puts his arm around the guy's shoulder. You would have thought he'd won, and maybe he figures, well, I'll show the photos of this. I'll claim I won because I look like I've won. But I mean, Nadal was a great sport, and both times Roger lost a match, he was a good sport. Okay. He only won 52% of all the points he won, but he must have been good at winning the break points or something.
He's
don't
my
talk Rog down over
Look, you're not on your Pat Malone there, are you?
No, not at all. Who was, speaking of the big three, who did you really enjoy watching and commentating as well?
Well, I like them all because I thought they were all very special in their own way. And I thought, it's unfair to the others because Roger is just... I used to think if Roger had never made it into the top 25 or even 50, that he would have been a cult figure in tennis because he was just so beautiful to watch. He was so balletic, he's so smooth, he's graceful. He had incredible repertoire of shots. And he was nice. Tony Roach, when he first started coaching, I don't think he would have said this to anybody else because he knew that I'd never say it to anyone. He said,
on a public forum.
I don't think he's ever going to be any good. He just can't concentrate. We're going off to play a really important match and someone wants his autograph. He'll sit down and talk to them for 5 minutes. Come on. You can't possibly be successful if you're going to give away your time like that.
How good. Your heyday was in the 70s with a tennis racket in your hand. And that was... there's so many interesting eras in tennis, but that one was bang, okay, you're all professional and there's a few things happening and everyone notices that, there's money to be made of this. And I'm not just talking players, there's promoters and everything coming in. And then that attracts a crowd and then, famous people, they just seem to be attracted to tennis in all kinds of countries. But what was it like playing, seeing the things that you saw during the 70s when tennis is evolving at a rapid rate like that?
Well, my first year travelling with Harry Hopman and the Australian touring team was 1968, which was the first year of open tennis. So the Australian had already been played, so that wasn't an open event. But the first open event was Bournemouth, the hardcourt championships in England. And Rosewell beat Laver in the final, and then the first Grand Slam was the French Open. And during those weeks, there was strikes all throughout Europe, but there were strikes in France. There was some question whether the event was even going to happen. But whether it was because it was open tennis, and some of these players, like Gonzalez, hadn't played there for 19 years. I think Rosewell hadn't played there for 12 years.
Because they'd gone to the professional
circuit. They had turned professional. Yeah, Rosewell turned in 56, and now it's 1968, and he's back. Laver had turned professional at the end of 62 after winning the Grand Slam, and he's back, so he had a little bit of an absence. And, how good were these players, and how were they going to compete with the leading amateurs of the day? And we pretty much soon found out because the four professionals made it to the semi-finals. Gonzalez beat Emerson, who was the defending champion, in 5 sets. He was about 42 years of age. Didn't need a walking stick to walk on, but used one on the way off. Joke. And it was a great match, 5 sets. And I remember the first point. Emerson drop-shotted and lobbed him, and drop-shotted and lobbed him, and then Pancho's ended up with a very average drop shot. He's run up, looked at Roy like this and patted the ball by him. And he said, Emmo, I can't continue. I'm exhausted now. Wins in 5 sets. But he played Laver. He was spent by the time he got to the semi-final. The other semi-final was, I think, Andres Jimeno, the great Spanish player, who'd beaten Santana, who was another great Spanish player who had not turned professional. And Rosewell, I think, won that match in 5 sets and then beat Laver in the final in 4 sets. A great era, and then went to Wimbledon for the first Open Wimbledon. Wimbledon was what really had pushed. They decided, hey, we're going to go open anyways. Join us, and they really forged the movement to open tennis, which was overdue, but great that it came.
Set the next, or to this day, set the rest of it up, Jules. How the professional guys came back, and then it was all together again, and away they went.
And you touched on this a little earlier, JA, that you started in the backyard tennis court with your sisters. You obviously have a political mind. You're obviously a competitive individual as well. You're a smart, astute businessman. Why tennis? Why did you pursue tennis first?
I just loved playing tennis. And my sisters played with mum and dad. I was eliminated from the game because I couldn't serve well enough. So I'm going to show you. And, eventually I got included in the family games. And then mum, who's a real entrepreneur, she did a deal with a professional tennis coach. He could have the court for free on a Thursday afternoon if the Alexander kids could get the lesson for free. So there was anything from 10 to 20 kids on a Thursday afternoon being shown how to play. But in those days, you were taught to play, and that was the end of coaching. You weren't coached anymore. But Sid then got us into playing afternoon comps and the Saturday afternoon into club and then junior tournaments, and I went and played in those. And the first one I lost in the semi-final, 6-love, 6-1, and I was bound and determined to beat Alan McDonald. It was the last thing I ever did, and we're still friends years and years later. But
so the Alexander kids then a little bit competitive, that household?
I wouldn't say they're competitive. They just hate to lose. No, it's a family joke. We've got a lot of humour in my family, which comes from Dad's side of the family, and gets us into trouble as much as gets the laughs, I guess.
So that love of tennis obviously carries you through to become good enough to play for a living for tennis, and it's taken you to some extraordinary places, some places where there's no longer tournaments for reasons outside tennis's control. For instance, Iran. You played in the early 70s, and this is obviously a few years before the Islamic Revolution swept through the place. But interesting joint, Iran, back in the day.
Well, it really was. We went there, and you deal a lot with the Americans that are living and working there for the American oil companies. And Lamar Hunt, who owned World Championship Tennis, had gone there to have meetings with the Shah. He was from an oil family in Texas.
So the Shah's leading Iran at that time.
And he's not only leading, he seems to be idolised. He was known, if my memory is correct, Shushan Shah, the Shah of Shahs. And the people that we met said, he was a playboy and he used to spend a lot of money and having a very good time. And then he got really serious, and literacy had increased, and education had increased, and he had a huge housing policy. It'd be good if our guys could learn from that to give those who previously couldn't afford houses to get housing and all the benefits that flow when families own their own home and have that security. And he was really highly regarded, and it seemed to be a place really on the move. And we're very happy to play there. It was altitude, which was great for my game because it was hard to hit the ball in. So if you serve and come to the net, even though it's on clay, up until Wednesday or Thursday, the balls goes flying by, and it was a big advantage.
Yeah, cool.
Is there a tournament that you, or actually let's say a city, a location that you really loved to visit?
Well, I like playing in the US, but that was probably the lazy way out because everything was just easy. Living expenses were low. The courts were, facilities were always good, and you could just about understand the language. I guess as I got more mature, I always look with Harry. The first time we went to Europe, the first place we went to was Italy. So we all, Filippo Dent.
Filippo Dent.
We all had Italian names. And I went back there with Bob Gilton, who was in our team, and he'd been best man I'd been best man at his wedding, he'd been best man at my wedding, and we were lifetime friends. I've been trying to get rid of him ever since, but I can't. But we went back about 12 years later, and he'd learned about 15 words of Italian, and he still had them. It was just hilarious. So we loved Italy, loved Rome, and we played in Florence, which was beautiful, and Naples, where I did really well as a 16-year-old, and just really loved Italy, and then we'd get a break and go and play at England, so it was nice to be able to understand what was being said to us, and like playing on grass, and love playing in Australia.
I don't think there's one person in Australian tennis that looks back and says that the Davis Cup has improved because of what's happened. And that is based on what has happened with the Davis Cup in years gone by and Australia's success in it. And some of they're almost like fairy tale, like folklore stories, not just stories. 77, Argentina away. Firstly, can you one-up Wally Masur, who sat here a few weeks ago and told us the story of when he was getting coins pelted at him in Peru? I can't imagine that the Argentinians in 1977 would have had open arms about an Australian coming in and knocking off their main men to progress in a Davis Cup competition.
We had an armed guard, and their way of asking the traffic to move aside was they'd take out their revolver, and whack the door of the car next door
Okay.
and hold up their gun.
That's a quick way to
Yeah, it's like
break things
Moses making the waters separate. But we were great friends with Guillermo, who we called Bill, because we found it hard to say Guillermo Vilas. He'd just won the US Open, and in the previous round of the Davis Cup, they'd beaten the Americans, so they were really tough at home on clay. And we had great matches. But the doubles, I always remember it's rained, now we've got dark, and so we've gone back to complete the fifth set, and it's 2-all something, and I'm serving the first game, win the point to the first guy, lose the point to the second guy, win the point back at 30-15, lose it to Vilas, win, lose. I finally lose the point and I did lose the point to the guy on the forehand side, and it's add to Vilas, and I think, oh God, we're sunk now. And I slide in a little first serve, try to get the first serve in, and it hits the centre line, and there's still dew on the court, on the line, and it just skids through like that. We win the point, ended up winning the game, and hung on to win that doubles, which proved really vital, because then Phil beat Kane to wrap up the match and for us to win 3-1.
Were the locals happy?
When I was playing Vilas in the final match, it was dark at 2-1, and we're saying, well, having a break, no point in going back out. The referee said, if you don't go back out, they will kill you. So we thought it was a great idea. I was very keen. I like playing in the dark, but at one stage,
You like being alive too, don't you?
well, it seemed a good idea at the time. But Vilas has hit the ball out on match point, and the crowd just wanted to be in, and so they've stormed the court. And I've gone to the ground, and I'm just trying to hang on to my racket. My sweatband got broken off. It was just kids, but and but I survived that. I won the crowd by losing the match. So simple.
Yeah.
So simple.
Yeah.
Won the crowd, lost the
Lost
match.
Lose the match, you win the
Kept your
crowd.
life.
Yeah, they like yeah.
I
It's
think it sounds like a pretty good deal.
triple win-win-win. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
What is it about that that playing for your country, representing your country, that we hear from athletes? I don't know if you can tell, we're not athletes, so I'm not quite sure what it's like to go out there and represent Australia. But there's always, particularly in sports like tennis or swimming, those individual sports, when it comes to playing in a team and for your country, what does it mean? Why does it elevate, do you think?
Well, when I was going back to learning to play and being coached, and the coach would tell you stories, I think the thing that impressed me was that we didn't have a Wimbledon. Our Australian Championship wasn't in the same category as Wimbledon or the French or the US possibly. But we had the Davis Cup, and we were winning it more often than not, and that was our major championship, even to the point that we were told that when we played club competition, it was game Branga. Our team was called Branga, and that conditioned you for then playing game Australia if you ever got to the point of playing Federation Cup or Davis Cup. And so it was special. I think we were at a time when we weren't as nationalistic as some other countries. When you'd go to play in Italy, there was a fervent support. The Italian crowds were great. They seemed rowdy on the surface, but they were very supportive of their team. There was other countries that would do things to try to distract and maybe not play as fair as you might like, or as lily white as we are. Got all that good sportsmanship about us. They've grown up in more desperate times, and will do anything to win or survive. So, you get to understand those that nature of that culture. But I think that the new schedule or format of Davis Cup is a great pity, because Davis Cup took world-class tennis to Argentina when it wouldn't have happened any other time, or we went to India any number of times and played there, and it just stimulated enormous interest to have international level tennis. And with it, really with blood in the game, their team playing against the others, and I think it's something like 75% of matches won by the home team.
How would you like to see it now?
I'd like it to go back to the way it was, but then I'd be called an old fogey, and I'd get angry. And
I don't think anyone's disagreed with you so far.
that I'm an old fogey.
Not on this part of the world.
Yeah.
No.
Maybe the ITF boardroom, because of their coin that they've got from the promoters for changing the format and everything. I think that might. You might be pushed back there.
The best competition money can buy.
Yeah, exactly.
It is a pity though, especially when someone said to me at one stage, when Djokovic and his Serbian team was winning, Davis Cup has died. And I said, I don't think the Serbians would agree with you. I bet it's bigger than Ben-Hur when they were having success, as it was when Argentina finally had success. Spain was a long while before they actually, a great tennis nation, been to the Challenge Round a number of times, never won it until sometime into the 80s. But when they finally won it, they really, tennis took another boom in Spain. It was a huge injection for them.
Yeah, gave it worldwide relevance in parts off the beaten track. So hopefully it can somehow twist around. Back to playing some emerging talents as well during the 70s. So a guy called John McEnroe burst out of New York. A little bit brash, but a little bit loud. What were your early first encounters with him like on a tennis court?
Well, Phil and I had a great sense of humour.
Phil Dent.
Right, Phil had a great sense of humour. I just
Yep.
laughed at the appropriate time. But Phil lost to him at Wimbledon, having beaten him in 5 sets at the French. And they were pretty friendly. And John was just sort of emerging. He'd gone through the qualifying, I think, and ended up getting the semi-final. And I said, there you are, Denny, discovering talent. I mean, you and I, we lose to these up-and-comers before anybody else. We can discover talent. So then a few weeks later, I played him in Canadian Open in about the quarterfinals. And I think it was 7-6, 6-7, 6 love. I win the last set, 6 love. Superior conditioning. And, he just lost it. When he lost the tiebreak in the second set, he just lost it. And I said to Denny, that kid's never going to be any good. I mean,
Didn't have the temperament.
good judge of
Did
character.
he just go berserk, did he?
He just lost it. Yeah, he just blew up. He was blowing up when he was playing Phil in a tight 5-set match. He was holding his towel over his face. He was obviously distressed and not happy. And
So out there, we saw that. You saw it. It was on the other side of the net. But when you get back to the locker room, does he kind of just morph back into a normal shell of himself, or did he carry that and he was like just on edge the whole time?
I found him later in life. I found him really good company. He's a highly intelligent guy, very insightful. He did the commencement address at the Stanford University, which he attended briefly. It's really worth watching. He is so insightful into his own mental condition.
Wow.
And he says, 35 therapists later, I finally know myself. Something pretty witty and it's like good Australian humour, which he would have learnt from his senior players. But no, he's an interesting guy. He has interesting views on tennis and where it's going, as Djokovic does. I heard a talk that Novak did the other day, and he said that tennis is the queen and king of racket sports. It's the ultimate form. It's got the grace, and he talked about it, and pickleball and these other sports are challenging. But he spoke so eloquently about what the sport of lawn tennis is.
Well, it has the history as well.
It has history. It has superstars. And when you said, I think earlier, that it attracted, when tennis went open, it attracted Hollywood stars. No. It happened much, much earlier when Bill Tilden was the dominant player. And Douglas Fairbanks Jr. and other great actors and comedians, you'd see them shake hands with their left hand like that. And that was to say, I play so much tennis, old son, that I have tennis elbow and I have to shake hands with my left hand. So it was, Charlie Chaplin was the other really guy, one of the leading celebrities of the day, who was very, very keen on tennis.
So they're all...
It's happened for a long while, yeah.
Yeah, wow.
I've noticed a few names being mentioned already, halfway through this. Yep. What is one of your favourite memories of, AP says, this, sport opens doors for people and opportunities. What was a door that opened for you where you thought, wow, how did I get here?
Yeah. Well,
one that you can share.
Yeah. I'd like...
Careful what doors
you
we're
acted
opening.
as his filter right there.
Exactly,
He was going to go one way and he thought, oh yeah, wait.
To bring it back.
I was not. I was going to say that I'm a real groupie for singers. I love singers. And when we were playing in Milano one year, and Luciano was singing at La Scala and
first
performing.
Name basis, you got to say the last name.
And
Pavarotti.
And so there's not another tennis player who wants to go. So I've gone with one of the roadies, a guy called Larry Pease. And at the half time, intermission, we've gone backstage, and Luciano's secretary has asked me to invite Luciano to play tennis tomorrow. And so I've done that, and he's graciously, yes, I'm going to play. And he had a little cassette tape deck that he'd recorded the first of the half of the opera, and he was listening back to critique himself. So we started playing tennis, and then he came to Atlanta and played. When he came to Australia one time, we played. I'd given him my mother's phone number to call, because I was going to be there at about that time. And he's called up and said, "Hello, Thelma, this is Luciano Pavarotti." And Mum says, "Yeah, and I'm Elvis Presley."
You forgot to pass a message.
Then she's gone and said, well, I was too poor to make calls home. And he says, "Oh, no, it's true. John said he was coming to play Davis Cup and would be in Sydney the following week." And she's going, "Yeah, that's right."
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So we all went and watched him sing at the Opera House with Joan Sutherland, and it was just a magical night. And we went and played tennis at White City, and I remember we got stuck in traffic going through the middle of the city, and he had this album, the first classic album that had been number one on the charts for some time, and there was just this crowd gathered around, because he was just so visible.
Wow.
And just the nicest guy, and just fantastic every time you heard him sing.
What was he like? Was he a diva? Was he normal?
No, he's just a really funny guy. And he'd say, his first thing he'd say is, "We are here," which was, I always interpreted, I'm big enough to be two people, so it's we. And then he'd say, "I have lost the 10 kilos, but now I put 10 kilos on." And so he's conscious of his weight. And he'd do funny things like when we were playing, he's called a ball and it's clearly in. He says, "It's out." No, it was in. "It has to be out, otherwise his game. Juice!" So he had this humour. He just wanted to play and be funny. He had a great facility with a racket, and his understudy was reminding him not to talk while he was playing because it was his rest day and he's meant to rest his voice. But very, very normal. Very. He came to Atlanta and I was at a club called Peachtree World of Tennis in Atlanta. He came to play there, and after playing all week, playing with various members and guests, he got an entire plate of sausage and cheese from his area in Italy to thank the members, and sat there with them.
Wow.
And drank the local wine from his area and entertained, thanking them for letting him play tennis with them.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
When we sat down to do this little operation here with the clubhouse, I wouldn't have thought that we would have spent 5 minutes talking about Luciano Pavarotti's love of tennis. But here we are, JA. Thank you for that amazing story. I wouldn't have picked him for a tennis guy.
He loved tennis. He was a bit critical of Adriano Panatta, the great Italian of the day, who'd won the Italian and won the French, and we played in the Davis Cup in
77
in Foro Italica in 76 in the semi-final, and then the final the following year. And we'd known Adriano, Phil and Bob and Ross Case and Jeff Masters and me. We're all the same vintage. We'd known him since 1968, and we were friends with him, Paulo Bertolucci and Corrado Barazzuti and Antonio Zuccarelli, and they're like us. They were, just love playing tennis. We travel the world, and we're happy as Larry.
Frank Sinatra. That's another name that you got to hang out with as well.
Well, interesting. I was friends with Pancho Gonzalez. I love Pancho as a player. I thought he was awesome. 1969, he had that extraordinary match with Charles Passerelle in the first round, won in 5 sets. He's got through to the round of 16, and I've got through to the round of 16, and he's back with Madeline, the true love of his life. He'd already married her twice, and now he's about to marry her a third time. And we're sitting there in the tea room, and Madeline sort of adopted me because I'm like a 17-year-old, and she says, "Richard, if you win your next match, and if John wins his next match, he's the youngest in the tournament, you're the oldest, and you two will play." And she says, "Yeah, how about that, kid?" He wasn't that impressed with that bit of information. But anyway, we were friends, and he's the touring pro at Caesar's Palace. Frank's singing there, and he's invited.
Pro at Caesar's Palace, the casino.
A good job. Well, they had a tennis classic there, the Alan King Tennis Classic. You talk about your favourite tournament. I mean, hello. You go and watch Tom Jones or Frank Sinatra at night, or if you really had great taste, you'd go to Roy Orbison, which I did 5 times in 1 week. There we go.
But they had hang on, we'll get back to Frank Sinatra. They had a guy that they paid money for to go on the circuit, but just put his name to Caesar's Palace.
Well, he'd pretty much retired from playing by this stage, and he was sort of he would referee the tournament, and he would play with celebrities as
an ambassador type.
An ambassador, yeah.
What a gig!
That's a good gig.
And free chips, no doubt, as well. I'm not talking.
And he helped Andre Agassi in his development at the time, and then he married Andre Agassi's sister.
Wow. Okay.
Wow, it's all very...
There's a lot of roads we could take here, Jules.
There was a lot of marriages.
There's a lot happening.
Can we get back to Frank Sinatra Boulevard though and drive this car back on?
So there we were having dinner. So we go to watch the first show. We have dinner, and I'm sitting right next to him, and he's just so normal. He's got these big calloused hands from gardening. He's a fanatic gardener. He's telling us about how he goes and gardens in the morning, then comes in and hits the heavy bag to build up his air, his lung capacity for his singing. Then he swims underwater laps, and then he vocalizes 5 times a day. And he's telling us all about this stuff, how hard he works. And then someone raises Australia, and he'd just been kicked out of Australia. I've just sunk under the table. Time to disappear. And he just says, "Oh no, this is all my fault." He said the tickets weren't selling, and the promoter was getting a bit anxious, and so he informed the press that I was here, and I reacted badly when they invaded our personal time. I'd brought Barbara out to Australia. I'd been here lots of time. He was working here when he couldn't get any work, and then he got the chance to audition for From Here to Eternity, and he went back and won that, and that set his career on fire again. But he said, the tickets weren't selling very well, so anything to gin along with tickets. And I reacted badly, and things went from bad to worse. But he loved Australia.
Sorry, there's just a lot to process. This is a history lesson in entertainment.
Yeah, I know.
This isn't just tennis.
It's not juice. it's entertainment tonight.
This is so good. Okay, so we've touched on the tennis side of things. I also want to talk to you about the commentary side of things, because obviously that played a huge part in your life as well. It's maintaining the tennis, and your voice was one we just came to know. It's one of those voices that you hear, and it reminds you so much of
summer.
Did you love it? Did you enjoy your time behind the mic?
I really did, because the hardest thing, I'd been on the tennis tour since I was 16 until 35.
It's a long time.
And when you stop playing, the world moves on, and they're all your friends, and you don't see them. And you're trying to re-establish after your tennis career. What are you going to do? And it gave me that ability to stay involved. And at that time, Channel 7 I think did something like 12 weeks a year of tennis. And then I started working for the BBC and doing Wimbledon for them. And it was a great learning process, because the culture and the way they wanted you to commentate. There was about 3 rules that the BBC gave to us. Wait for the applause to finish before you start to speak. Don't speak over the umpire, and don't feel the need to fill up all the vacant places. Don't say what we've just seen. It's television. We've just seen it. And I'd have these great conversations with Gordon Bennett from Channel 7. I don't really remember Gordon, but he was he was really thirsty for knowledge, and he loved hearing what was the BBC. What are your instructions? Because I love the way they do it, and they really had their directors, talking to the commentators, calm it down, too much, or children, are you still awake? We need to hear from you again. And it was very well monitored, and I think that was good. And even we had this thing that he adopted. It was called the nose hair shot. And Wimbledon, when the player, when they used to go to the net to volley, and they'd dump the volley into the net and turn around, and they've gone down match point 30-40, and their faces had just dropped. And to get all of the drama, they'd go in for this nose hair shot. So they'd close in on the server's face as he faces the match point at the break point or whatever it was. And they were very good at that. They'd start off back, and then as they'd the match had got closer, they'd come in really close to see the the strain on the player's face. A little bit like Frank Sinatra was saying about singing his songs. You got to leave somewhere to go. You got to start off a little easy and build it up long. And the other funny thing he said, where songs are only 3 minutes long. He says people don't even want to listen to me for more than 3 minutes. very, very safe and self-effaced, very dad jokes, I guess.
Who, as a commentator, did you really enjoy sitting next to in the commentary box?
Well, I got to work with the greats. The first Wimbledon I did, I worked with Tony Trapert, who was a great commentator, great player. Then I did some work with Dan Maskell during Wimbledon, and he was the doyen he was the greatest tennis commentator there's been, I think. And then John Barrett followed on from him, and he was great, and he was great to work with. And one of the tips that John gave was, after the point, you look and see what's on the screen, but you look to each other's eyes so you can see when the other person is going to speak, so you're not talking on top of each other, and you make it a conversation including the third person who's the viewer. There's always some good information that they had, and lovely people. And Alan Stone, who was a great mate, we played Davis Cup together, and I worked with him a lot, and he was great and still going strong. I think, I'm not sure, it's close to his 50th year of doing the Australian Open.
I think this year, 25 will be his 50th. So he told a great story last year. I was sitting there, Jules, and talking about it. A player was having one of those electrolyte things at sit down. I said, Alan, what did you do during your time, like during sit downs? He goes, oh no, maybe a glass of, act like a seagull, a glass of water and a look around type thing. Whereas, and I said, oh, what about pre-match? Like you see the players in the restaurants fueling up and everything else. Oh no, an hour before we went on court, we were advised to have a big steak and don't drink any water because it might kind of slush around in your stomach. You want to go in as light as possible, but the steak is to give you the energy, and no water because you don't want to be carrying that on a tennis court. And I'm like, times have changed. Times have changed.
Times
have
changed.
It's fascinating because that's part of the fabric. Back then, they would have thought that is the same as now having a Gatorade at sit down.
And great nicknames. His nickname was Rolling
Stone,
which sort of gave him a sort of notoriety. Yeah.
Why didn't you get the great instead of just JA?
Oh, I was so happy with JA. There was a tennis player, John Bartlett, who had these fictitious book titles, which are pretty funny, but he was JB, and when I got JA, I thought, oh, great, it's not. There was some pretty awful nicknames around, which I won't repeat.
But tennis, like you go back to the Australian Open, and you'd walk down the corridor and see all these old friends all the time. You stop and have a chat, and it's kind of weird in a sense because tennis is viewed upon as a very individual sport. Maybe not so much for the Australians who travel together a lot, but very individuals. There's a whole bunch of individuals placed together in the one place, trying to beat each other, and then you move on to the next place to do exactly the same. But once everyone retires, everyone still has this love and affinity with the sport, and if they can be involved, like you were with commentary, they're happy to be because they remain friends with all these people. They have so much respect for each other. It's quite an interesting place in that regard.
The early stages of open tennis, there was great camaraderie with the players. I mean, everyone was welcome to have dinner. There was one or two that might have irritated you a bit, but you'd still let them come along for dinner. Elena Stassi, one can be pretty aggravating. But look, the camaraderie and the decency, and when Phil and I were so young, 16 to 17 and travelling, how decent the older players were to us was just extraordinary. I mean, lifetime friends. I played doubles once with Andres Jimeno, and he was, maybe 15 or 18 years. He seemed like an old man. And we played and we won the tournament. And all he kept saying, just get the ball back, John. He's a really conservative player. Don't do anything, mate. Just get it back. And I'm thinking, you are an awful doubles player. And, I'm quite good at doubles, but we won the doubles event and it bonded our friendship. So we had this greeting where I'd say, Andres, the greatest team to ever exist. Never been beaten and never will be.
What do you make of the game today and the life of these players? Because it's just, you go for using the Australian Open as an example. It's incredible to see the whole tennis world underneath that Rod Laver arena. It's a whole world under there now, and it's a very... there's the dietitians, the physios, the doctors, the technology. There's something for everyone. What do you make of the state of the game now?
Well, so it's changed. It's changed. The rackets are bigger. The string technology is bigger. It allows for more spin, which has changed the game. I would like to see it go back to the original size rackets, which would stop so much spin and bring a little bit more finesse to the game. I am in violent disagreement with allowing coaching during the game because the whole nature of the sport is it's one person against the other. Coaches shouldn't even be in the building if there's any chance that they're going to advise a player during the competition. Now it's legal. That's just a departure. And I think sometimes these decisions are made because people don't understand the history and the nature of the sport.
What's a TV?
It's like with Davis Cup, they didn't understand really,
the fabric
what they gave it away. But the whole nature of this sport is it's one person against the other person, And a big part of it is thinking around a problem. You've got a problem, you're losing. The first thing you get told is when you're losing, change your game, and when you're winning, don't change your game. And so you've got to experiment and try something different when the score's going against you. You've got to learn to stay calm. Don't have somebody telling you to do this. That's not making you a tennis player. You're just the one hitting the balls, and it's a team effort. So I guess it won't change, but
I'm with you.
I think it should.
Yeah.
It should go back to the way it was. We should have a renaissance of tennis. 5 advantage sets, wooden rackets on grass. No. It doesn't need to be 5 advantage sets, but I think the original size racket is what it should be.
Can you pick a favourite player of the current era?
Look, I can't pick a favourite player of any era because I just loved so many of them. And if you can say, you're a favourite, just Federer over Nadal or Nadal over Djokovic, they're just 3 great players. I mean, the one you got to feel sorry for is Andy Murray. I mean, fancy coming along when you got 3 players like that during your career, and yet he still won a number of Grand Slams. And there's been some terrific eras. When tennis first went open, and Laver and Rosewall were playing, and then Smith and Ash, great people, great players, and Newcombe and Roach, and the Australians were still doing well. Emerson and Stolle, and talking about talking to Frank Sinatra, Frank Sedgman the other day. That was the beginning of that golden era. So there's great times, but and then you look at the women, and you just can't go past the Williams sisters. And what Serena and Venus did for women's tennis, and it came on the heels of a pretty hot era. But what they did in dominating Grand Slams, I think they played in 7 out of 8 finals over a 2-year period. There was no 2 women in the history of tennis, even when Margaret Court and Billie Jean King were dominating, who played in as many finals over a period like that, let alone being 2 sisters. So I don't think that will ever be broken. But I thought, Serena came in for a bit of criticism in the later part of her career when she lost it over bad call or whatever at the US Open, and I defended. I thought, she cares.
Yeah.
She cares so much, and she's so uninhibited that when she really thought that she'd been cheated and not treated fairly, she lost it.
Yeah.
Doesn't everybody lose it? Just look at the road rage out on the street today. I mean, people lose it at the most minor things, let alone in the heat of the moment trying to win a record number of Grand Slams or whatever it was, and she's got a bad call in her mind, and she's stoutly defending herself, and she lost it because she really cared. And I thought that was great. Having won that much, some people think, I've won so much, it doesn't matter, but it did matter, and she cared, and I thought that was a great thing about her.
So tennis was great for your life. I just have this one query, and we'll keep it quick because we're a tennis chat. We're not a political chat. But I've just got one question about your time spent as a Member of Parliament for the seat of Bennelong in the Federal Parliament of Australia. For how many years was it all up?
11 years and 8 months.
11 years, 8 months.
Wow. Was it really?
I just have one question, because you were living a comfortable life. It was, you had many great contacts. You could have done anything in why?
That's the only question I had too.
I can be funny and say, well, why? Well, look, I was approached. I had a meeting with Brendan Nelson, and at the end of the meeting he said, look, I understand you've got no interest in ever going into politics, but why don't you just join the local branch, and I'm not going to run at the next election, and maybe you'll change your mind. And I just thought he was so decent and he was so funny. He said that he'd started off life wanting to be a great player, and I said, yeah, me too. And his wife's name was Gillian, my partner's name was Gillian, his daughter's name is Emily. They run my life here like me. We had so much in common, so many laughs, and so I go along and join. And at the time I was stuck in a high court battle over White City, and it was really, really unpleasant and very great strain. And the night that I'm going up to join, I get in the car, turn on the radio, and Brendan's announced his retirement. There's going to be a by-election, which I didn't know much about politics, but I didn't know what a by-election was. So anyway, that's where I lived, and I ended up joining and then running and not doing very well. And then John Howard, who I'd met a couple of times before, and he asked me in for a cup of tea, and 3 cups of tea later, I'd agreed that I'd run for Bennelong, and that's what I did. And as I got involved, and through the conversation with both John, especially John, said that a party should only win government by the presentation of better policies, and a government should only ever hold office by the delivery of those policies. And I was really interested in developing policies that would make Australia more of a Commonwealth again, because I thought there was a great concentration of wealth happening. It was the lowest rate of home ownership in 60 years when I was first in Parliament. There was supply issues. There was issues of the advantages of the investor over the home buyer to the exclusion of the first home buyer. And that system is just ridiculous because it imprisons the renter who pays for the landlord to get rich. It is so inequitable and unfair, and why can't that just be explained? And then people would understand why you've got to moderate the negative gearing laws, not eliminate them like Labor suggested a few years ago, because that would crash the market. But there's got to be a way of having a lever that controls the percentage of deductibility to gradually bring it back to a marketplace where you've got wage earner competing with wage earner. At the moment, Sydney prices are 16 times the average wage to buy the average house. If you went back 40 years ago, 50 years ago, it was 3 to 4 times the average wage to buy the average house. So it's hugely
converted
underpriced.
over there.
Preaching, just bought a new house.
So if I ran again, you'd vote for me.
Well, the bank bought it for you. You bought a little sliver of it.
The
What, you got
bank
the front door? Or?
owns me.
Yeah.
Not owes me. I wish the bank owed me. The bank owns me for a long time.
And then what some of my colleagues don't realise is they put the interest rates up 3 times. So your mortgage has now tripled, the interest component, and then you pay it after tax dollars, which is a further compounding problem for you. I mean, it's just absolutely absurd. American mortgages are 30-year fixed rate. So when they put up the interest rates, it doesn't affect anybody who's got a mortgage in the US.
John, I was going to leave here all inspired.
Super. Well,
and now I feel...
Just think of the Pavarotti story.
Make this an
It'll
issue.
make you happy.
Yeah, hit the high C.
Yeah, exactly.
You have had a there's so many chapters. We've just covered off a few of them. There's so many chapters in your career, in your life. Can you pinpoint a favourite? Has tennis been the highlight? Has it been the commentary? Has it been the politics? Has it been being able to do all of it?
Well, it's very hard. I wasn't very good at school. I didn't like going to school, so to get out of school and go and play tennis was just like a godsend. I think when I was 25, I'd still wake up in the morning and thank God that I didn't have to go to school. So I love playing tennis. I love the friends that we made playing tennis. I still talk to Phil nearly every week, and he goes and plays golf with his grandson, who's a great player, Declan, so watch out for him. The tennis players are sort of breeding good golfers. Ray Ruffles has bred a couple, and Liz Smiley has bred Elvis, and Elvis is just, he is the king. It's those friendships, I think, that you take from tennis, and I think from then developing sports clubs and doing other businesses, it's always the friends that you make during that endeavour. And then in politics, I'll name drop, Anthony Albanese is a very keen tennis player. We played tennis for 10 years.
Too keen a couple of weekends ago in Perth.
How dare anyone criticise him for going and having a game of tennis? Come on. He works, like him or not like his politics, whatever else. You got to admit he works very, very hard, and he tries very, very hard. But when they rolled Malcolm Turnbull to put in Scott Morrison...
Your mate.
No, we all got our favourites.
Talking about politics.
But... I said to Anthony, come on, I promise we were going to go out and practice and work on your game. Today's the day. We can't do anything. Parliament are in pro road. So we went out for 2 hours and practiced our tennis. And he was a great student. He picked up things very quickly. I taught him how to spin his second serve so he could serve and volley off his second ball as well as his first serve. And it was good fun, but it was more the mateship that we had formed, just through playing tennis on Thursday mornings.
Who's a better tennis player then? The current Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese, or Luciano Pavarotti?
Oh, no, Anthony's much better than Luciano, yeah.
Oh.
You'd run him around.
Yeah.
Poor old Luch couldn't run around a bit.
Apparently, Emmanuel Macron plays a very good game. There's meant to be a game between them and chosen partners at some time in the future.
Plenty of lobs in that one, I dare say, if they either got to the net, if they can see over it.
Yeah, don't mention the submarines.
Yeah, no, exactly. Sorry, Jules. You're wrapping things up.
We've covered so many topics. I wouldn't have picked Albo for a good tennis player. Yeah. There you go. You still play?
Are you suggesting I'm too old?
Not at all.
No, I haven't.
I'm
I've just had a. I've
you
just had
look
a new.
very fit.
I've just had a
actually.
new hip put in, so I can
Did you?
try to move again.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, Murray, look at you
We
go.
have a great Saturday afternoon group at Birchgrove Courts.
Great.
Got about 18 to 20 people. We play social tennis.
How
and then,
good.
Then we have drinks afterwards, and we
See?
tell more lies. By the end of drinks, we've all been great.
That's the way to go.
Yeah.
I'll be there with the Pims. Don't you worry about that. What a treat. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for coming into the Clubhouse. Thanks for chatting to us.
Thanks, Joe.
Well,
so nice to
thank
see
you for inviting me. It's been fun to talk about these old things.
Exactly.
And, sorry they all happened before you were born.
Please don't apologise. It's nice to feel young sometimes. That is another episode of Deuce. Stick around. You never know what we're going to chat about. You never know who we're going to chat to. AP, your little black book, you've done it again. Well done.
Thanks. No worries. I don't know who else is coming up, but we'll find someone. I don't know if they're going to cover the ground that this great man did, but we'll try.
What a treat. That's the latest episode of Deuce.
So there you have it. That is Deuce. Now, don't forget, if you enjoyed what you've seen here on Fanatics TV, give us a like if you can. Hit the like button. Also, subscribe. It's somewhere down there. And importantly, tell your mates. Grow the Clubhouse. We want all in.